Ladies and gentlemen, chess is a beautiful, magical, mysterious, and captivating game with a very rich history and some very rich personalities who have played it over the years. And one of those personalities is named Mikhail. He is known as the Magician of Riga because his chess was magical and he was born in Riga. Shocking. Mikhail had a fascinating playing style, and he was just an incredible individual as well, with a fascinating story. I made a video a while ago called The Man Who Invented Brilliant Moves. So if you haven't seen that video, it's worth watching. But in this video, we're uncovering a fascinating detail about Mikhail's life, and in particular, when he got the Grandmaster title. You see, if you are a chess fan, or you're not a chess fan at all, this is one of your first chess videos, we have a title. It's called Grandmaster. It's the ultimate title. But the Grandmaster title has not even existed for 100 years. In fact, it's only been about 75. It was only officially first recognized in 1950. And Tal didn't have the Grandmaster title. He received the Grandmaster title in 1957 because of one tournament. He played one tournament and he won it. The USSR Championship. The championship of the Soviet Union, 21 games, 22 players, 21 games. It was a round robin. He won first place with 14 points, only at the age of 20. He was a 20-year-old winning the Soviet chess championship against killers. And in today's video, I'm going to show you several of those games from the 1957 USSR Championship, the one tournament that convinced everybody to waive the restrictions and give Mikhail Tal the Grandmaster title. Can you imagine? You play one tournament and they go, damn, okay. Like, that's all it took. These games, I've got 4 games for you. These are unbelievable games. Tal just had this aura, and he got it done in so many different ways. So sit back, relax, and let me take you down this history road. I know a lot of you enjoy historical chess videos, so one of his opponents was named Bukhuti Gurganidze, and the fascinating thing about Gurganidze is that he was one of the original Georgian grandmasters. He was a 12-time national champion of Georgia, and he invented multiple openings. There is an opening in the Karo-Khan defense after d4, d5, knight c3, g6, which is literally called the Gurganidze, which is named after him. Can you imagine? You made an entire opening, and it gets played into the modern era. Now, back in the day, Gurganidze played d4 with the white pieces, but that is what he used to play with black. Tal played knight f6, c4, and Tal played c5, an invitation to play the Benoni defense after d5 and e6. Nowadays, this is considered a slightly dubious, very slightly dubious way to play at the ultra-elite level because white maintains a very nice space advantage in the center, but it's microscopic, and if it fits your playing style, you should play it. Black's entire approach is based on the open e-file, as well as putting the bishop on this diagonal, and because white moved a flank pawn into the center, white has a center advantage of 2 pawns versus 1, but black does get some flank play with his pawns. So let's put all of that to work. Tal plays bishop g7, bishop e2, both sides castle. You see both sides getting their kings to safety, which you know you have to do. Rook e8 targets the pawn, knight d2. You may wonder why Gurganidze moved his knight to d2, blocking his queen and bishop. Well, he wants to support his pawn, and the knight is going to go there in conjunction with the move a4, suppressing what black wants. And from this square, the knight pressures the queen side and the weak pawn on d6. So every chess opening comes with a starter kit of this is what you should do with white, and this is what you should do with black. And for a while, you will follow games that have happened already, and then you will leave that territory, and then it's up to you, right? Knight a6, a weird move, simultaneously maybe threatening to come forward, also opting to go backwards to apply pressure to the center and support this move b5. That's exactly what Tal does, right? We see white doing exactly what he's supposed to do, which is control the b5 advance. And now in this position, we have b6. Tal basically says, look, I'm not going to be able to play this in one go, so we're going to very slowly build all of this up. Gurganidze played queen c2, just a very simple, straightforward, standard idea, which is trying to support the center. And now he will expand. Now here, Tal decided knight g4. And Tal decided, I need to end up in a Gotham YouTube video some 67 years later. 57, 43, 43, 24, 67. Yes. Knight to g4. basically saying, look, Bukhuti, you've got to take my knight. My knight is annoying. It's targeting a lot of things near your king, but I don't want to take your knight. Why would I just recreationally trade the bishop for the knight there? Bishops are better than knights, right? That's what he should have done, though, and then he would have started applying pressure with his knights. Instead of that, he messed with Tal, and he played h3. And he was like, Misha, what's the knight doing here? Like, what is the point? You're going to put it on e5 next? I don't understand. Nope. Mikhail Tal sacrificed his knight. If you left things near your king that were only protected by your king, this man would ruin your life. Now the best move for white is literally to ignore the knight. Yeah, Bukhuti was like, dude, what is he? Is this guy like on something? Like he probably inhaled the fumes of the samovar. It's what they used to make tea. Bishop, queen h4 check, king f1. But now what? Well, that was the thing. If you mess with Misha, then, you know, you would face all your demons. Bishop d4. The threat is mate. But so what? Knight d1. And Bukhuti had clearly calculated that there is no checkmate. So now Mikhail is going to sacrifice his bishop, which makes sense, right? But he's not going to take. If you take, it's mate. I understand. But then he was going to go rook here. The bishop would have went back, and then Bukhuti would have played like knight e3, and the game would have continued. What he had failed to realize when Mikhail played this move was Mikhail is deviant. He thinks all the wrong things in chess. He finds all the moves nobody thinks of. And Mikhail Tal had seen in this position that he's not going to sacrifice the bishop to open up the king. He will sacrifice a queen. And that presents a very unique set of problems, because if you had sacrificed the bishop, I don't have to take you. But if you sacrifice the queen, I don't have to take you because I get mated, but this comes with a very unique set of problems. Bukhuti now defends himself, but here comes queen h2, and it is an avalanche pouring into the white position. Knight c4, the center is opened up, the clouds are opening, the bishop is sniping you from the other diagonal, and it's just a matter of time. Rook to e5, you can't take it because you're pinned. Here comes the other rook, and Mikhail Tal is just bulldozing you with 25 points of attacking mechanism. And then, just when you thought he has one piece, Tal has one piece that he hasn't moved yet, and he gets it in the game. Oh my goodness. That move doesn't even look possible, because you can just take. Rook takes. You can't take with the knight because you open up the diagonal and queen g1 is mate. This man, Misha Tal, would just get all of his pieces, just pieces that were dead. They were just gone. They were standing around. Knight d5, rook d5. He bulldozes the white position, and he forces a resignation after 27 moves, because once you take the queen, once you take with the queen, it's check, and it's mate. Oh my god. Oh my god. And we are just getting started. This man really played queen h3 against one of the legends of the game, Gurganidze. Just unbelievable. His tactical vision, you couldn't let him get going, you know? Now, this is a fascinating matchup. This is Tal, who is a dynamic genius, an attacking powerhouse, up against probably the best defensive player of all time. You can argue nowadays it's like Hikaru. Like, you know, you can argue that Hikaru is one of the most, best defensive. But at the time, Tigran Vartanovich Petrosyan was just on another level. So he played a French defense. This is a Winauer, and it's a line where black takes the knight, damages white's pawn structure, and we get into a very fascinating game where white is sort of pushed back, takes on d4, and this looks like a very dynamic, complicated position, and Tal is trying to make it that. I mean, Tal is trying to give up all his pawns, right? And then he's trying to create an attack. Yeah. Petrosian knows better. He's like, I'm not going to get into all of that. Yep, look at Tal, just g4, just throwing all the pieces forward, taking on h5, opening up the g file to create some sort of attack. But again, Petrosian, one of the best defensive players in the world, he's like, nope, look at this. I'm utilizing moves that don't even look possible. And now we're going to get stability. The position has stabilized. One of the best attacking players of that generation versus one of the best defenders. It's like sports. Right, it's like sports. I mean, it's like in tennis, a player has a tool that they like to use versus a tool of the opponent. It's hitting head on, right? Like what happens when the best offensive team in a sport plays the best defensive team? It's what we have now. We have stability. These pawns are kind of stuck. This pawn is stuck. Tal is going to try to put pressure over here. Can he blow Petrosyan just completely out of the water? I don't know. Queen g5. Petrosyan going for an endgame. He's giving away the pawn on g7. You see, if Petrosyan played king f8 here, then after rook g1, it's really difficult to defend this pawn, right? You're just gonna... So he's like, all right, take the pawn. Misha, take the pawn. You think I need the pawn? I don't need the pawn. Queen f8, let's trade queens. Misha's like, nope. Petrosyan's like, no, seriously, let's trade queens. Misha's like, nope, we're doing it on my terms. And Petrosyan knows if he can get the queens off, if he can get a little stability, he's going to be all right. He's going to be all right in the long run. He gets the bishop into the game, all right? Petrosyan, Tal starts bringing his king. Now, the amazing thing here, Tal finds an idea that is wild. He finds a way to march his king into the center of the board. It's an endgame, but it's a very imbalanced endgame where there's a lot of like open lines to the other party. There's weird structures, like this pawn is here for some reason. It's kind of the remnants of playing a now we're French. Right now, the move h6 is highly preferred by Stockfish. You can't take because of check, and I win the rook. But the other idea is to sneak the pawn to h7, after which black will be under a lot of pressure. Obviously, Tal has his reasons not to play this move. Probably thought it was a bit of an overcommitment. He probably didn't like that the pawn could become weak. So he brought his king. And he brought his king. And he brought his rook to seize control of the only open file, and then he tried to trade the knights. And his idea with trading the knights was very simple. He didn't care if he got taken or not. He just wanted to put his king in the center of the board. And now he's got a very, very pleasant edge. He's not up any pawns, but it feels that way because he's about to take one, right? Now, f5 was a major commitment. Instead, f6 is preferred by the modern day computer to try to basically absorb this very depressing position and say, I'm not going to lose. But f5, right? Tal had this way of making even the best and most reserved players in the world panic. And when this started happening, rather than buckling down and playing a pawn down endgame, Petrosyan lashed out. f5 was already a step in the wrong direction. He should have went f6. What was even worse than f5 was advancing with f4. He pushed f4, he opened up the diagonal, which now allows the pawn to go to h7 in the future, and that is exactly what Tal went for. He trades. There is a golden rule in endgames. If you want to win an endgame and there are 4 rooks on the board, 2 and 2, not 4 for you. If you're up 4 rooks, God bless. But if it's 2 and 2, trade 1. If you're trying to win, trade 1. Sometimes trading 2 is also fine, and what I mean by that is like in an endgame like this one, you can trade all the rooks because your outside pass pawn is so strong. But not always. But now h6. And now the king takes the pawn, the bishop goes to g6, and the way that Tal sets up a winning configuration here is incredible. Watch this. King d4, where's the breakthrough? Puts all his pawns on dark squares. Look at this quest that he fulfills. It's because the black bishop can't touch those pawns. And now look at that. You can't take the bishop because I queen, you can't take the pawn because I take your pawn. He anchors the bishop here. Lifelong pressure will exist. He defends the pawn, and now it's just masterful. He gets there, and he ends this game in style of Tal. Take, take. The pawn's promoting, but Tal can't resist. He can't resist playing like this. It's a race. d5, trying to break the bishop out of purgatory. Both sides are going to make queens, but it doesn't matter. Tal is up a bishop and 4 pawns. That's mate, and that's going to be mate very soon. Discovered attack, and there's nothing to be done. Queen c1, you can give me a million checks. My king goes all the way down the board. There's a way to get stalemated, but in this position, Tigran Petrosyan resigns, and what a win. And you know, it was fascinating to just see a player like Tal take down a player like Petrosyan in this battle of styles, in this clash of like offense, defense, dynamics versus stability. And pragmatism and just the smallest of imbalances utilized. He brought his king up. This pawn was the difference maker, and just a very nice win. Now, Tal could also get it done in different ways. Like Petrosyan's an incredible player. Bronstein is maybe the best chess player to never be world champion. That's a video in and of itself, and maybe it exists already because you're watching this in 2026 or whatever. Look at this game. So this game began as a Slav defense. Ironic because, the players. But G6 is not a move that white has played, so it's not symmetrical, and now, rather than keeping it symmetrical like this, seeing that your opponent is committing to this move, Tal takes. So he creates a stability and basically says, look, your bishop is just useless. I mean, it's just slightly worse for me, right? I develop, we both castle, you want my bishop, come and get it. You now need to take it like this, which would then isolate your knight on the edge of the board. So Bronstein says, no, Misha, I want to take the bishop, but I want to do it this way. Now the bishop tucks away on f7, like this, and now Tal is just going to basically put pressure on this side of the board. Except he's not going to do that at all, and he attacks the center. He targets the center. Okay, I mean, I would have thought he was going to, operate on that side of the board, but no. He targets the center, and he's going to try to attack with e4, e5, and, et cetera, et cetera. So these bishops are passive. So let's see what's going to happen. Rook b8, and Bronstein starts playing like b5, and Tal plays b4. But what are you going to do with the knight on c4? Nothing. He's just going to take on a7. He's like, look, if David is going to give me the pawn, terrific. Bishop e8. And now, seeing as though the queen is about to get trapped, basically, you can go to c5, but then I will play rook, like again, g4, rook f7, queen c5, there's rook c7, and there's bishop f8. So the queen is just trapped. So now Tal says, I'm going to take your knight. So bishop e8, I'm going to get rid of your knight. And we're going to play knights versus bishops. Rook f7, I can get my queen out. Now this is the position. Let's take. And now white is going to try to play this position for a victory, right? White is going to advance because he has two passed pawns. So queen b2, Bernstein plays g5. He has to play g5. He has to play g5 because he has to give white something to think about. If you just play king h8, king g8, white goes here, you play king g8, white plays b5, and this is white's game plan. So you have to give white something to think about. So now Tal puts the queen on d2. What? What's the point? Well, if g4, now there's no bishop h6. And everything is protected, and I'm going to put my rooks behind my pawns. I'm just going to go. So he offers up the pawn. Queen d2, he offers up the pawn for capture. Knight takes d5, hits the rook. The rook moves back. The knight reroutes. And Tal is just going for the endgame. He's going to try to swarm that pawn. Now, the d pawn blocks the bishop from seeing his pawn. The a pawn stopped the bishop from going there. So to dominate bishops on an open board, you basically just have to cut off their targets. You have to make them useless. It's a very difficult skill to do. Now these pawns fall off the board, and we trade all the rooks. And Tal is like, I'm up a pawn, and it's a very useful pawn. Now watch as he dominates. He puts the knights on all the light squares. He starts controlling all the light squares. He's going to go back into the black position. Look at this. And because all the pawns are overextended from the earlier phase of the game, the black king is quite weak. He doesn't care about the f2 pawn. You know why he doesn't care about the f2 pawn? Because the black king is stuck in the bunker with those bishops, and this pawn is going to mobilize. Now, if you play something like queen d2 here, I'll take your bishop, and I'm going to go for your king. And there's nothing you can do. Look at this absolute domination. Knights, pawn, queen, like a little diamond in the center of the board, glistening. The threat of this, the threat of removing the bishop. If you move your bishop, let's say to a3, it's mate. It's mate. King h8, knight f7. My mouse is doing some weird stuff. King g8. Okay, I guess my mouse is just broken. That's cool. No, I don't know what's happening. My mouse is, oh my goodness, it's like just refusing to move. What the heck is going on? Hate when this happens. Might have to order a new mouse after this video. Queen g6 checkmate. That is what would happen. Instead we have h4. It doesn't really matter. He takes on f8. King g3, the king is safe. Queen e7, and in this position, Bronstein resigned because king g8, queen d8, king h7, queen f6. This is mate. This is f7. So it's just over. He gets it done versus all these players in such amazing ways. And the last game I got to show you, this is against a strong chess master from the Soviet Union, Konstantin Klaman. And this is just vintage Tal. So if you're 20 minutes into this thing, we will end on a good note. We will end on exactly the way that that Misha Tal plays chess, which is like this. Playing the Sicilian defense against Tal is just, you know, you're asking for it. Knight f3, knight c6. Speaking of which, remember Gruganidze, this player who invented openings? He has a variation in this very opening, in the Rossalimo, castles, bishop g7, rook to e1, and there's a line here, e5. There's actually a very strong move here, pawn to b4. It's a very odd gambit, but it's actually been played at top level, and the idea is to deflect some pieces off the center, and then white tries to get some initiative with a3. So Gruganidze invented this as well. So he invented two openings. The guy featured in this video straight up invented two openings. Being a Soviet master is incredible. You can leave such an impression on the game. In this game, though, Tal played d4, take, and we have a Rouser variation of the Spanish, where Tal, I mean, this is just like, you know, it was automatic. I mean, he was pre-moving. He was going to take the knight, damage the structure, long castle, and say, like, let's go. Let's have some fun. So, Clement played rook c8, obviously, you know, trying to fight on the open c file. And many people here would play king b1 because it's slightly scary. No, Tal was just like, let's go, f4. I'd like to attack you first. I traded my dark squared bishop, so I want to build up on the dark squares, right? Clement now lost the right to castle. He brought his rooks to the game instead. But, you know, you could argue that the king's quite strong here. Like, this is a very solid setup. The only way to break it down is going to be to try to take some risk and open up the position, and maybe white is actually weaker than black. Black plays e6, immediately taking advantage of that diagonal. Tal plays bishop h3. Now, black's best move was probably f5 to try to open up the diagonal like this. But again, you're playing Tal, so you're a little bit scared of opening up the center. So he does this, bishop h3. Tal says, queen trade, what are you, nuts? How else am I going to get into a YouTube video 67 years in the future? And black played b5. And I mean, black is doing what black is supposed to do in this position. It's very complicated. But when you give Tal stuff like this is like feeding a caffeine addict a really good cappuccino. All right? Or Americano, or flat white, or cortado, or whatever it is that you drink. Macchiato. Rook e1. So finally, he plays his king to b1. His queen side is stabilized, and he's ready with knight d4. And there it is. And I mean, in this position, Clement must have just like wanted to experience skydiving in chess form. You know, like some people are adrenaline junkies. They want to skydive. They want to do certain things. They want to swim with sharks. They want to experience cool things in life. Taking honey from a beehive or from a bear fits into that description. Like, he could have played a5 and just kept going with his pawns and maybe played bishop e7 and slowly built up the attack. No, he's like queen e4. Queen e4. Let's see what happens. Taking a pawn with a queen and a king directly in the line of sight of Tal's position. f5 here is very strong. Obviously, if takes, you just lose. You lose your queen. But if black plays e5, then, you know, light squares are weak. I can play knight f4, knight d5, maybe knight f4, knight e6, maybe knight f4, knight h5. But instead of that, he plays knight d4 first. Queen goes back to b7. And Tal just plays queen d3. And he's like, hey, Kostya, how are you going to defend your h7 pawn? One of the possible moves in this position, by the way, is to play rook h8, but that's extremely depressing. The other one is to play king d8 and try to walk the king to safety, which is hilarious. He goes here, though. Tal's like, okay, I'm going to take my pawn back. Thank you very much. And now bishop g4. And he has this and this in mind, as well as f5, as well as an h-pawn, like he had against Petrosian. King a1. So the king is completely tucked away in the corner of the board. And now Kostya plays f5. His idea is to bring the bishop to the game. But yeah, Tal is a nasty counterpuncher. And he does not play bishop h5. He just takes the damn pawn. And I think at this point, Kostya might have realized, I stole the bear's honey, and I probably shouldn't have done that. He takes on f5. Losing a bishop, sacrificing a bishop is not enough for Mikhail Tal, who in this position has to add to that by sacrificing the rook! Rook takes e7. So now he's down 4 points of material, which is effectively a rook. He's down a rook because he got a bishop back, but he lost, he lost that material earlier. But how do you guard your king? And usually, this type of stuff ends in like check, 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 checkmate. Place check. Only move queen h6. How do you guard your rook? How do you guard f6? And how do you guard the back rank all at the same time? You can play rook f7, but then you lose to the back rank. You can move your rook, then you lose f6. So what do? Nothing. That combination, uncorked by Tal, strips the black king of his defenses, and he's going to win his rook back, and he's going to get some interest. Now he's up 2 pawns, and this is just vintage Tal. Don't take the rook, by the way, because that hangs back rank mate. Instead, he just plays rook c1, and I got news for you. He's going to open up the c file as well. So bishop a4, queen d4. Now he's going for the endgame. Queen c4 check. And in this position, black resigned because it's a fork on e6. And if you play king d7, you actually make it even worse for yourself. He could have defended a little bit better. He could have maybe played something like rook d8, but it's completely lost. It's lost because even the endgame is losing after queen g7, but knight c5 is a fork. You cannot take. It's also a fork of this. It's a completely lost position. Yeah, Tal won the tournament with 14 points out of 21 games at the age of 20. I believe the youngest winner at the time, and maybe ever, by the way. And for his performance, they granted him the Grandmaster title. So he straight up played a tournament, and he got the Grandmaster title for it. That had never happened up until that point. I mean, the Grandmaster title was only 7 years old, but he got it in 1957, and obviously a couple of years later, he went on to become the world champion. He went on to win the world championship at the age of 22, 23. Yeah, you talk about a successful career, especially early on. I mean, just an absolute genius with so many games, defeating so many legends that had, been older than him, more experienced than him, and running through them. And back in the day, they played tournaments that were 20 games long. So a chess tournament was an entire month. Wild stuff. Let me know if you want me to take more historical deep dives, particularly into 20th century or 19th century chess. I always love looking at games of Tal. I always love looking at the storylines and some of the legendary games that he had. I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.